So we're going to talk about transferable skills. And so, Nicole, I would say that you just talked about a transferable skill of continuous learning and adaptability. So that's the kind of things we're going to talk about. I want to just do a quick poll. How many people work in HR? Okay. And how many of you did Javier sort of freak out with his presentation? Nobody's going to be brave enough to put their hand up. So I haven't seen Javier's presentation before, but I've had a conversation with him about a lot of the stuff he talked about that made my head explode. And it's partly exciting and partly like, oh my gosh, this is like crazy stuff. But back when computers first came, I remember I was probably in high school, and people were afraid of using the computer at work. And quite frankly, in university, I lost enough papers that I was afraid of the computer too, because they didn't used to be our friends. Now they are they take care of us so well that we don't have to save our documents anymore. But back then, people were afraid of using the computer, and they didn't want to use a computer. And now, how would we even live without a computer, let alone all the things Javier talked about? So I would describe myself as the complete opposite of an early adopter. So when Nicole put Javier and I together to do this presentation, this is like two opposite ends of the spectrum. So I'm going to bring you down right to earth level, and we're going to talk about some transferable skills stuff, some HR and interviewing stuff. But as Javier was presenting, it really made me think about something that I see almost every day in my life, which is Star Trek: The Next Generation. So my son is 15 years old, and he is an early adopter, and he thinks I am right back there with the horse and buggy. Like with my Samsung phone, he just thinks, and I think I'm so with it, I have this phone, and he thinks, God, my mother is so out of it. But we watch Star Trek: Next Generation almost every day, and I don't even have to ask how many people have seen that, because it's been in our world for 20 plus years. And back when we used to watch it in the 90s, I expect that we all thought that it was pretty crazy. And now when we watch it, they're using things that look like our iPad. And then we didn't know what an iPad was in 1995. But the most interesting thing that your presentation made me think of is Data. Does everybody know who Data is on Star Trek? So he's the android. And that's what Javier is describing. And as I watch Star Trek now, from the lens of being an adult and having been in leadership roles, and you watch the captain navigate all the crazy things they get into, he's got two people that he relies on really closely. One of them is not a person, it's Data, because Data will give him information without any feelings attached to it. But the other person he relies on really closely is the empath, Deanna Troi. Fascinating to me that so far in the future, and this is a vision of the future, that one of the people that he relies on is the person who can tap into feelings. And so when I was listening to Javier's presentation, we were talking about teaching the machines. That's what she does. Because what's Data's greatest wish? He wants to be more human. So he spends a lot of time developing human characteristics and learning how to be a human. And one of the people that helps him the most is Deanna Troi. And she teaches him about empathy and feelings and how to express himself. And that's kind of where people like me come in, because I'm never going to develop a machine, but I am going to continue to help people develop their people side. So that's where we're going to go with my presentation. No, I won't say any questions because Nicole will kill me. I'll keep moving. So before we jump into complete HR, we're just going to take a quick look at a snapshot of Calgary's GDP by industry. So I think you probably have this one in your paperwork. 1997 is on the left, 2016 is on the right. So when I examined this more closely, it's really interesting because a lot of the pieces toward the bottom, like personal services, manufacturing, construction, have all increased over the past 20 years by about 2%. But primary, oil and gas, and utilities have decreased by 20%. That's over since 1987. So I've lived in Calgary since 1998, and I thought I'd seen a lot of change. And we all think we've seen a lot of change in the last couple of years, but really, it's been changing for 20 years. So it's not as if all of a sudden things are different. So when we talk about transferable skills and recruiting, often in Calgary, the dialogue's all around oil and gas, and especially now. There are lots of oil and gas people whose background is in oil and gas who are now looking for work in all across sectors. And so our conversation is often about what skills do they bring out of oil and gas to other sectors. Well, this has been happening for a long time. This isn't brand new, because all these other ones, starting with finance, insurance, and real estate, have clearly been hiring people for the past 20 years from somewhere. So it's not as if it's new, but we're looking at it in a different way now. Any thoughts on this particular slide? See, Javier didn't let you talk, but I'm going to make you talk. So we've already, thanks to Nicole, we've gone around the room and we know who's in the room. And we actually, by my list, have lots of oil and gas and lots of post-secondary. And then I talked to Eric on the break, and he's in the logistics area. So I told him he has to speak up because I think he's the only logistics person in the room. So you got to represent. Yeah. So this is another interesting one. And again, you probably have this in your paperwork there. Lots of stuff to take in. But when I looked at this, the one that's most interesting to me is clean technology, including renewables. It says it will employ anywhere from 76,000 to 100,000 Canadians directly by 2022. That's a lot of people, and it's up from 55,000 jobs in 2014. So when I looked at that, and again, I have a 15-year-old son who wants to go into something related to science, and I'd really like it if he came back to Alberta after he goes wherever he's going to go for school. And so I often talk to him about renewables. But the other thing that's interesting for us in Alberta is all the talk about converting all of our skills in oil and gas into more renewable energy and what that might look like. The other one here that's interesting is IT, right at the top, 182,000 professional positions by 2019. That's tomorrow. That's not in 50 years. So really interesting, the labor demand, because what we're hearing a lot is that still there are a lot of people out of work, not of their own free will in Calgary and Alberta. So interesting to think about what might be coming. When I did chat with Eric, see, I told you I'd make you talk. He said this number for the logistics sector is almost exactly what they're working with right now. Anything? One thing that what Javier was talking about the phone and fixing the screen, I talked to someone yesterday who told me that Elon Musk is now coming out with roof tiles that are solar panels that are going to last forever. And this is my personal thought. I have zero information to back this up. I think this period of time where everything was disposable is short, because we cannot continue to have everything disposable. Because what is everything made of? I used to have a chemistry teacher in the late 80s who would say, in his kind of monotone voice, if plastic disappeared, we'd all be embarrassed, because everything we're wearing is plastic. Everything around us is plastic, and it's made from a non-renewable resource. So sooner or later, we have to figure out how to not throw everything in the garbage automatically. But that's my own inner thinkings. So we're moving on to the future. Javier's taking us there. Will your business be transformed or disrupted? Well, I think we're already in disruption, and we're hoping we'll be transformed. So in terms of strategy and your current strategy, and as you think about what Javier just shared, and you think about your own job and your own department and your own business, what in your current strategy relates to a lot of these kind of future-focused topics? Does anybody want to share?
Perspective. Most of my experience at Shell has been in retail marketing and whatnot, but I'm currently in an HR role for talent and employer branding. And just in the last few years, I've seen massive transformations in the digital channels that we're using and a shift to social media. So that's happening. Events are becoming much less face-to-face and a lot more virtual, even though they may not be super efficient in converting to hires. There's much more appetite to do more of that. We're looking at things like bots, some of the platforms that we're now using for recruitment and talent screening. We're not necessarily bleeding edge here. Other companies are doing this already, but we're just moving in more into video interviewing and screening online and things like that. So just the industry that I'm in, I'm seeing massive changes in the tools that we're using and in the people, the way we're resourcing, plus a shift to more offshoring of some of our transactional based processes to countries that are more cost effective. So dollars are shifting to other countries, but we're working more virtually. So that's
interesting. Anyone else? Okay. We're going to leave a hot mic there so everybody behaves themselves. We're going to talk more about that area further on here. SWOT analysis. Does everyone know what a SWOT analysis is? So this might be the only thing I learned in 4 years of business school that is still used, and it's actually a really valuable tool. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You can apply this to anything. Companies will apply it to their whole operation, but I've even applied it as a decision-making matrix because it really, when you get into using it, it really gives you a much clearer idea of what your best decision is. Often it brings you to a decision that you don't actually want to make, but you've certainly made it with lots of good information. So we're going to work on the SWOT analysis later on. Just wanted to introduce that and make sure everybody was on the same page with it. So recruitment. You'll see me checking my notes because I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Recruitment doesn't, the core of what recruitment is doesn't change. It's not like we're doing something disruptive or different when we look for people to work in our businesses. But like you just said, Anita, that's you, right? Thought she might have switched seats. What Anita just shared is how we recruit is changing in terms of the technology we use, the processes we use. And what I'm going to talk about is the types of skills that we look for and the ways that we use people from different areas, like different industries, different parts of the world, different parts of the country, all that kind of thing, so that we're not slotting people into boxes, because we can't. That slide we looked at where there are so many people needed, and Javier talked to us about all the jobs that are going to disappear. It's not like we can say, you were in this slot and you can't move. We have to say, what did you learn in that slot that now you're going to use somewhere else? So in terms of new skills, Anita shared a little bit about what you're doing. Does anybody else, in terms of just recruitment, have anything they want to share with the group about where they're looking for skills now? Or if you're doing anything, and we're going to talk much more about this, so this isn't your only opportunity to share. Yes?
We just hired a new person, and one of the questions that we had was around how did they teach themselves the new software. So
Perfect.
We're looking for those skills of how do you learn something without having to take a training program and go get a certificate. Like how do you, in the moment, figure out what you need to learn and then move forward to do that. So that was a key skill.
That's awesome. That's perfect. Do you want to just hand over?
Maybe it's not a skill, but we're looking for people that will help us bring innovation to the business.
Yes.
So, maybe if we don't work in manufacturing, so maybe we'll bring people from manufacturing because we know they have a lot of lean experience and a lot of skills that, they can bring their ideas and juxtapose them over the existing models. And, just
That's cool.
cross-functional, cross-interdisciplinary teams.
Yeah. And it sounds like some creativity too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Others? Agatha.
So a few years ago, I did some work around creating a program to hire veterans. This was back at Suncor. There had been some success bringing in weapons technologists to work on the big trucks. And there's a lot of initiatives. There's a number of organizations that have been doing it for some time. So it's about understanding what they can bring to the table at a very core level and transfer it onto a different machine than what they've worked on up to that point.
That's perfect. You coming up?
I'm
No,
just,
you
I'm
just.
just being your vulnerable.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about today is 2 recruitment terms that we, whether you work in HR or not, you've heard. So we're going to talk about skills and competencies. And these get interchanged all the time, and everybody has different definitions for what they are, but these are the ones we're going to work with today. So skill, you can see a level of proficiency in performing a specific task, an expertise, and then competency is groups of related behaviors. So you've either, it says you've decided are desirable for your employees to possess, or that you feel are required for the job. On the skill side, there are skills like computer skills, or like you talked about, mechanical skills. But then there are what we're going to talk about today, transferable skills. And the transferable skills, they're skills, they bleed slightly into the competency area only because they're not hard. Like you can't measure them with a degree or a diploma or a certificate, or you can't get somebody to do something in the interview. We can't do a speed typing test. I don't know if anybody even does that anymore. We certainly did, but they're still very important, as we're going to see. So competencies focus in the following areas. And we all can think very easily and quickly of competencies that are required in our own jobs, in our teams, in our companies. And this, I believe, is in your handouts, yes. It's just giving you an example of some competencies, and CPD is continuous learning, basically, continuous professional development. So it's what we've already talked about, what Laurel brought up, that being able to teach yourself things, or Nicole said with from the telex to the photo, being able to continually learn. So this is something that you can take a look at for yourself, for your staff, for your peers, where you can quickly figure out where are the gaps, which of these things are important to us in our work, and then which ones are important and we don't have, and that's a gap, clearly. So when we talk about technical skills, abilities and knowledge needed to perform specific tasks. They're practical, they relate to tangible tasks. Software, tools, skills that relate directly to your service or product. So when Laurel talked about being able to teach yourself a software, it's a software that's used maybe just in that company or just in that industry, not necessarily anywhere else. So then we get to transferable skills, the fun stuff of our conversation. So again, I don't want to miss anything, folks. So the focus of our conversation today is going to be transferable skills. And when Nicole and I first started to talk about this subject, this is something that I get kind of excited about in my own recruiting experience. So most of my HR work has been in the nonprofit sector. And I started recruiting, I started recruiting when I got my first HR job, but I did a lot of recruiting in 2006, 2007, and that was a big boom time. People are nodding. If you remember, it was crazy. And I worked for a nonprofit where we might, and these salaries even sound crazy nowadays, but we might have been able to pay between $30,000 and $32,000 a year for an administrative assistant. And we couldn't go above that, but oil and gas sure could. So you were always trying to figure out who among your candidates was going to do a great job for that salary and where you might source them from. And often in nonprofit, we have people working there who are either really dedicated to a cause or they want a particular lifestyle that working in nonprofit gives them because it's got a different focus. So sourcing those people has been such a fascinating part of my HR career that when we talked about how do we make recruitment, how do we bring recruitment into the disruption and the change, that's what I really wanted to focus on. And so that's where this whole thing came from. So when we think about transferable skills, I think of things like customer service. So when I worked at HRIA, I had people who were on the front line and answered the phone calls from members. And lots of times members weren't happy. And so it was fast-paced, it was detail-oriented, and lots of times the person on the other end of the phone wasn't really that happy with what you were telling them. So customer service was so important for those roles. And finding people who could deal with customers was way more important to me than finding people who'd worked in a professional association. So that's where the transferable skill example comes in. I'm just going to turn the floor over to you. The microphone is what I'm looking for. When you think about yourself and transferable skills, do you think you have transferable skills? Maybe you've recently gone through an interview process and you know them really well because that's what you've brought to the table. Anybody want to share one that they have themselves?
Take a different angle on the question.
Okay.
So, I actually still attend. I don't think this is on, by the way.
Sit up.
It's on. It's just not reading.
Oh, okay. So actually, I currently attend STATE in a brand new supply chain management program, and I think it's interesting because a lot of the things that they're trying to revamp the way that they're teaching the program. Certainly, there's still kind of some of the older elements of the way that they deliver education, but there is a lot of ways of trying to make it different to approach this kind of a concept. That you can't just teach some of the simple things in and out, that you have to teach the things that you can end up transferring to whatever it is that you end up doing. So I think it's interesting that even this is starting to proliferate into the education system with the brand new programs that are coming out. So.
Anyone else want to share anything?
I would say one of the skills that I have is connecting people with people and people with information. And in my last 3 jobs, I started in a nonprofit, then I was at Bow Valley College, and now I'm with the government. And the consistent skill that I've used over all 3 of those jobs is helping people by connecting them with other people or with information. So it's kind of like networking and analyzing a situation and thinking, oh, you might benefit from talking to this person, that kind of thing. So kind of a networking, connecting people skill.
That's perfect. That's a transferable skill. Laurel, here.
I have one that it kind of triggered when Javier was speaking earlier. One skill that I think I might have, but one that we try and teach our learners at the college is the ability to find and use information. So instead of the knowledge-based economy, you can't know everything. You have to have the research skills so you can find the information you need to do whatever the task is in front of you, which is constantly changing. So that's a transferable skill, I think.
Yeah. Anyone else? Dan.
So I work at Mount Royal University in the finance co-op program. So I deal with students who sometimes will walk in for meetings and they'll have, customer service jobs sort of thing. So I had one student come in the other day. He did some job as a mechanic. So kind of to the point about transferable skills, it was really kind of having a conversation with him, asking him probing questions to say, okay, at your kind of basic level, what skills did you use? So you're dealing with machines. So you were, you had to problem solve. You were dealing with analytical stuff. You had customers that you had to talk to. So that was customer service. You were communicating. So kind of really pulling out those things. And at the end of it, he was kind of like, well, I never really thought of it that way sort of thing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is just kind of, thinking about it differently to say, these are the kind of key aspects from a skills perspective that I use, and then how those can apply to different positions.
It's perfect.
I just want to say something that Laurel mentioned, and I think is extremely important. I had the opportunity when I was working at the airport to work with a lot of co-op students and meet with them at lunchtime. And one of the things that I will ask the person immediately is, how many connections do you have on LinkedIn? Right? And they would look at me like, what, LinkedIn? And I said, like, yeah, how many connections do you have? And they were like, no, I don't have a profile. I say, okay, so here's your job. You have to go and sign up, connect with me, and you need to have 100 connections by the end of the month. So you have 30 days to have 100 connections. And the purpose of that is that you're absolutely right. Your future value will be measured in the number of connections that you have on your network, because it's not about you knowing, right, the answer. It's about knowing someone who knows, right, the answer to that question. And for me, that is an extremely valuable and transferable skill.
Because let's face it, how many of you do have contacts in your LinkedIn or social media, folks that you never communicated with? And you cannot even email that person and say, you know what, let's go for lunch. I need your help and stuff like that, because they don't know you. It just, sometimes it becomes a game, you know what? Kind of like collecting stamps, right? Okay, I got another one. I've got 100 connections, 1,000 plus connections.
Collecting
And
stamps. You're showing your age.
you know what? Yes, I might be
I've got a
showing
stamp
my.
collection too.
So, how many valuable connections you have? I rather have 100 valuable connections than 1,000.
But you know,
Right,
Michael,
so-
it's what you make of the connections, though.
Well,
It's the idea
absolutely.
that- and with all the tools that are out there now, it's the ability to say, where can I go? Where can I broadcast this from, right? And if you've got the right connections and the right pathways to do it, the technology is what's there to bring it together, right?
Yeah, I agree with that, but at the end of the day, I believe that it's not a race to click and make connections, okay, regardless. Oh, I got a new LinkedIn request, okay, let's friends and stuff like that. I mean, it's, at the end of the day, do they represent much? I don't think so, unless you connect another way and you develop a relationship.
Yep.
I don't price much on the number of connections you do on social media or LinkedIn.
So that brings in the concept of strategy in identifying the connections and the outreach, because otherwise it is a collection of individuals and you may never really interact with them. So I think that that is extremely valuable because, for instance, for the talent pool, anyone that invites us to connect, we personally vet. Because it has to be useful to them, and it has to be useful, of course, to our connections. So there is strategy in that identification.
So, I don't have to use this. Clearly, Nicole, your next session could be on networking and use of LinkedIn.
There's too many experts in the room.
Lots of conversation around that one. So it sounds like everyone here has a really good idea of transferable skills, not only your own, but even how you look for, and Dan, great example of how you help students figure out their transferable skills. I once worked in an organization where I had, the receptionist said, I don't do anything special, I just answer the phone. Oh, she was a wealth of transferable skills because she's the front line. So showing those to people is so empowering and also helps them to take them out to the world and find ways to use them in jobs, in different jobs. So we've gotten ahead of ourselves, but that's okay. So transferable skills, some of them are ones we learned on the job, and some of them are ones that we've learned elsewhere in school or volunteer work or even within our families. A lot of them are around process. So Carolyn, yours was a great example of knowing how to connect people and communicating and figuring out how to put all the pieces together. And that's a bit of a process too, even though we don't think of it that way. And we take them with us from one employer to another, or they're innate qualities. So a lot of these are things that we have always done. And I find for myself, sometimes the things that come naturally to me, I don't even give them much credit. I think, that's no big deal. Anybody can do that. And it's really helpful to sit down and look at your own skills and go, actually, no, not everybody can do that. And that is a transferable skill that I have. And then when you get looking at your staff or the jobs that you're recruiting for, again, you might have a person who's fantastic in their role and they bring a lot of these innate skills, but if they win the lottery and leave, what are you looking for that really makes that job successful? And we've got lots of examples here. These are in your materials, and some of these we've already touched on. Computational skills, that goes back to Laurel's example of a transferable skill that focuses on technology. So even though it's not what we would call a hard skill, where they needed to know how to use Outlook, they needed to be able to teach themselves and have a natural ability with technology. So these are just a few more examples. And when we look at these, and some of the ones we've already talked about, are there any that are up here or that we're thinking about that wouldn't transfer from one job to another? That you would go, yeah, I used that at ABC company, but I'm never going to use it again? Probably not. Most of those are transferable. Does anybody have an example of something that might be here? Like, is anything resonating for you in the opposite way, where it's not transferable? Or has anybody learned something that you've never used again?
Other than in school?
Like Nicole's telex. You could put that on your resume and nobody would care, right?
Nobody would know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, nobody would know.
But I have an example.
Transferable skills, we're going to move into a little bit more conversation with each other. But I want you to start thinking about when you're hiring, or for those of you who don't actively participate in hiring or recruiting, but when you're thinking about filling roles within your team or applying for jobs yourself, why are transferable skills important? You can't be successful without them. And you can train for technical skills, but it's really hard to train for transferable skills. And that's something that, again, back to my recruitment back in the boom times, I would often find myself saying that to a manager. Look, this person has everything you need, but they've never done this. But you can train them to do this. And they really want to work here. Like that was really a key piece. So that technical skill that might have been missing is much easier to train than to train someone to think analytically, or to work with a team, or to do customer service, or to connect people, or whatever that transferable skill is. And to take us back to the beginning again, the pool of talent you can hire from increases a lot. When you move away from, have they done X, Y, Z specific things, and more into, are they able to do A, B, and C? And we've already heard some great examples of this from the room, where I loved what you said. I can't see your name type, but that's, I'm going to smile and wave, where you talked about how it's all interconnected. And then Agatha's example with machines, that everything can transfer from one place to the other because the goals are often similar. So I want you to think about this now that we've kind of taken it down to our own teams, our own selves, the people we hire, the people we work with. Think about the present, the past, it doesn't matter, a problem employee or a coworker that caused you a lot of grief. And think about whether the problem was related to a technical skill, they didn't know how to do something, or a transferable skill. And then the second one takes us in a different direction. Have you ever interviewed someone who was a perfect fit for your team or your company but had never worked in your industry? So give it 30 seconds thought, and then just talk among your table, and then we'll come back and share in 3 or 4 minutes. What's...
Janice, may I have?
Yes. Oh. Just as I was giving up.
Out of your misery. Just one of the examples, I said quite the opposite, that one situation that I had was that their technical skills were actually excellent. It was a transferable skills that they lacked, and so they were quite efficient in their role and, better than the team, but they wouldn't step up to be a team player or to assist others or to help, and that's what became the issue or the problem, which just makes it even more important.
Yeah, it's really interesting how on paper they can look perfect, and then in action, the things you didn't, maybe, not that you did this, but sometimes we don't consider the things that are actually going to cause us trouble. Anyone else? Do you want to pass the mic?
I've just had that experience where you have a problem employee and you tried the training on the technical skills, and then you soon realize that it's not really the technical skills, it's that underlying unwillingness to learn or take feedback or anything that's really kind of hampering them from changing any of their behaviors.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Just one comment.
Just let me grab that. Thank you.
At least from my experience, what has been the most difficult thing actually is to get people to say, okay, I'm going to learn a new way of doing this, because they say, well, this is the way we've been doing it for, I don't know, the last 10, 7, 5 years, whatever the time frame it is. And is getting actually to that new mindset where you say, okay, I'm open to learn something new. So I get a lot of people with resumes and they say, yeah, I'm fully competent, capable, I have the experience, but I want to do it the way I know. I don't want to do it the way you do it. And that for me has been one of the biggest challenge.
This just came to me while we were talking about this. Has anybody successfully trained someone in a transferable skill? All the time? Yep.
Project management,
Project management.
helping members of the team take responsibility for their piece of work. And learn how to manage that.
Yes.
Not have someone help them manage it.
Yes.
So
So,
they become independent.
yes, makes sense. Okay, so on that note, our next, you guys get to keep talking and working. In your package, there's a job posting. Looks like this, Industrial Marketing Specialist. And when you pull that out, take a look at it and have a read through. It's very short. Even well, mine's on 3 pages. I'm not sure about yours, but it's well spaced out, so it's not a long one to have a look at. Have a look and see if you can identify skills that would be transferable, regardless of the job or the industry, and see if you, as a secondary fun, see when you read this if you think that this job posting would actually attract the right people. And this is really, we're really getting into HR work now. But just take a couple of minutes and have a look, and then we'll come back. So in your, when you're having a look at this one, what transferable skills do you see that this job has that a job seeker might bring, regardless of their background, their industry? Yeah, so connecting with lots of different people. Yeah. Agatha.
Problem solving,
Problem solving,
analytical skills,
analytical,
numbers.
numbers. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a job. It's it has a lot of pieces to it. And then the second question was, do you think that this particular posting would attract the person they're looking for? No. Tell me. This job description hurt me to read.
I just think absolutely not. You're looking for a manager or director, and you're calling it a specialist. And no, I'm not discrediting the position at all, but when you call it a specialist, you're going to get an individual starting out just looking, and you're looking for a director or a manager. They wouldn't even, in my view, wouldn't even look at that.
Yeah, so a specialist really indicates like this person has a deep knowledge of this area, but really they're looking for a broad range of skills.
Looking for more of a director or a manager to oversee, as opposed to, and I don't think you'd get that individual because they'd see that in.
Yeah. So the title alone.
Those skill sets.
Yeah.
When you have 15 years of.
It's a 12-month contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're paying really 12 months.
Yeah. That's well. And it doesn't tell us if they're working with a team or if they have a supervisor or if this company's ever done marketing at all. So, yeah.
Sorry.
Yes.
I was just going to say that to me that 12 months was a very interesting
part of because to me that says we need somebody who can come in, hit the ground running, and do a job. And so it's not a role that I viewed this as the business driver was somebody who could come in, hit the ground running, and within a 12-month period. So I think there is an expectation that there is, perhaps deeper industry knowledge, has already some of those connections, that kind of stuff, as opposed to this is a longer-term program. What are we willing to invest in this person who we're hoping to be there for a long period of time? And so for me, it's really about what's the business driver behind the role as well. And I saw that 12 months as being, we need somebody to hit the ground running.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, right? Anita, do you want to?
Can I?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry. You
Nope.
need to talk about this because this is so with your role. But my comment would just be like, this is a relationship heavy role, And I just wonder how that plays with the 12 months as well. Like, you know, you're giving them a bunch of relationships as well. So that's all I'll say.
Thanks. My perspective was they had way too many really specific requirements, like the international experience and lobbying with government relations. I thought, I've got over 25 years of marketing experience and I've done almost everything else, but I wouldn't be able to tick those boxes. So I thought they'd have to give their heads a shake, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? Sorry. Yeah, and I don't think you've touched this yet, so sure.
I was just going to say, to add to what Pat was saying, is I think a more effective posting would be saying what Pat was saying rather than all of those credentials. And to what you were saying just a second ago, is it's interesting because the stats show that women don't apply for jobs unless they're 100% qualified, and men will when they're 60%.
That's what I thought of too. Yeah.
Just to change the perspective, the way I was looking at the posting is how many of these things can I automate?
Of course you were.
Yeah. And I think that it's going to be part of the exercise in the future, right? If I try to really summarize this to the very specific things that I need from that candidate for a 12-month contract, I will look at things and say, can I automate this? Can I have something else doing it? And then I'll end up with just the core things that I really need for that 12-month period of time. So that was kind of my perspective when looking at it.
I have just a quick question. How many of you in your organizations, when you create job postings, you do it with transferable skills in mind?
You're the worst offender.
So show of hands, how many? How many of you, when you create job postings in your organization, create them with transferable skills in mind? Okay. Because in my experience, that is sometimes where companies fall short. They focus so much on the technical skills that then it restricts the pool.
So it's interesting, right? It's interesting how much conversation a job posting can create. And it's also interesting how much conjecture we all had to use to figure out what they were really looking for. So I think it's clear to all of us, it would be a lot more efficient from a recruitment standpoint if they really knew what they needed. So when we talk about they need to hit the ground running, maybe the person that wrote this job description hasn't even realized that that's who they're looking for, or they don't have the clarity on what they really need. And so they may go through a recruitment and hire someone, and the person's excited and they're excited, and then it's going to fall apart. So really getting that clarity on what they need is so important to the recruitment being successful. And the transferable skills, this job, I think, is like just rife with great opportunity for transferable skills. But as Nicole pointed out, not everybody uses those as a basis for a job posting. We often focus on the things that are really easy, like do they need a degree or do they need 5 years of experience? Those are easy for us to see and for the person to figure out. It's the harder ones that the transferable skills that are the harder ones. So when we talk about clarity and we talk about developing clarity on our core business, taking stock of the skills that you already have. So we don't know who else is in the marketing department with this job posting. We don't know what other skills are there. And then finding the skill gaps and what skills is your team missing or your organization missing. So preparing to transform and preparing to access more areas of the economy, of the world, for the people that you're looking for, really you need to develop clarity. So what's the true purpose of your business? Well, the person that wrote this posting probably knows what the true purpose of their business is, but they don't necessarily know what skills they're going to require. They know they need marketing, and they know they need all the things in the posting, but what does that really look like in the person that they're going to hire, and where are they going to find them? And then what skills are in top demand in their industry? So we could do an exercise here. before we move over to the SWOT analysis. But I'm just going to ask you if anyone has any deep thoughts on these before we continue on. Do you feel, maybe I'll ask you a question that will help, do you feel that your business, your department, your area has clarity on what their core needs are for skills? Seeing some nods. Do you have an idea of what skills are going to be required in the future? Some of you have already talked about a couple of those. It's hard. We need a crystal ball sometimes. And what skills are in top demand in your industry? This one might be the easiest one. Any thoughts? Yes.
We call it the friendly guinea pig.
The friendly guinea pig. That's better than the unicorn.
Yeah. And
Tell us about the friendly guinea pig. What does that look like?
All companies are going to go, all surviving companies are highly likely to go through a digital transformation if they're not already going through one. And we're all going to get disrupted if we aren't already. And one way that we can participate rather than kind of get rolled over is to be a friendly guinea pig. So just to reach out when they come over to your department, to say, hey, what bugs you in your job? What could you do better? Oh, I don't want to work with paper anymore. All right, what ideas do you have? Like if you can jump on the bandwagon, a lot of times you can participate in experiments. You can just join the team and be a friendly guinea pig. Then you can get all new skills that you'll be able to keep your job and even hopefully, move up in your career through that.
So then keep the mic. Let me ask you, when you're recruiting, how do you determine who's a friendly guinea pig from among your candidates?
We are a change-intensive organization. So resiliency, adaptability, and attitude are
they're huge.
The things that we're really looking for. Like, people that have already gone through a lot of change or that show that they're not, that they want progress.
Cool. That's great. Any other thoughts? I hear giggling. Oh. Okay.
Before you move, I'm sorry, I keep doing this, but it's impossible for me to be quiet about it. How many of your companies have thought about the idea of not doing what they do in the future? Right? And I think that is, like if I ask you, like how many of you thought that Tesla was going to be doing tile roofs, right? They might say, they might recognize that we never really thought about that, right? And I think as we look at skills and demand and everything else, that is one of the questions that companies need to start not just thinking about, but really considering very seriously as part of their future. As you said, like if you're not being disrupted, you will. And what if you have to change your entire business because of that, right? And I think goes back to your comment about being a friendly guinea pig is actually being able to go into something that is absolutely different from anything that you do today. Like Amazon started as the bookstore. What is Amazon today?
Yeah, I know people that order their toilet paper for their family on Amazon. Those are very organized people. So back to the SWOT analysis. This is a great exercise to use if you're not as clear on the clarity of your, if you don't have clarity on the purpose, the core reason for your business, or even on a particular position. So maybe in your department, you're feeling like there's a gap, there's something missing, but you don't even know who's going to fill that. And when I joked about the unicorn, lots of job postings now are saying they're looking for a unicorn. And oftentimes in nonprofit, I was looking for a unicorn. I needed somebody who would work for less than industry was paying, but would bring 100% to the job every day and maybe do a weird little combination of tasks and be really happy doing it. That's, and it's where you really have to figure out what's the gap. And so sometimes the SWOT analysis is a great exercise to go back to and use that to develop clarity. And we've talked about this a little bit. What skills do you need? What skills does your team possess, and at what level? So do they just know about the skill, or is it something that they're really good at? And so we've given you another checklist here that you can take with you back to your office and use. So a quick cartoon. We're looking for someone with your exact qualifications, but a mechanical version. So we're looking for Javier. So we've talked lots about the skills that are needed in the future. What skills can we add through training? We've touched on that one too. And then to your current team, what skills could you add by recruiting new staff? So we give you another tool here that you can take back. And then we're going to get into recruiting for the last little bit here. So I feel like we have a good handle in the room on recruiting. Traditional recruiting, we often focus on technical skills, education, certificates, credentials, your work experience. I know as a recruiter who used to look at lots and lots of resumes, I never used an ATS. I know what it is, but I wouldn't know how because I always worked for such small places. But you're looking at it and you want to quickly scan. Those resumes that don't give me a chronological, I don't like that as a traditional recruiter because it's not easy. It's not bite-sized. So that's really traditional and cookie cutter because it makes it really easy to see the things that you think you need because you're focusing on technical skills, but it doesn't dig deeper into the transferable skills unless, as Agatha says, the candidate is leading you to it. And you're really looking for a perfect match. You want to know that they did this here and they're going to do it here for you, exactly the same. And there are a lot of workshops and programs and all kinds of things now that are helping candidates to highlight their transferable skills and focus more in that area. But I don't feel that there's as many on the employer side to train employers to look for those transferable skills in the same way. But that might be I might just be missing that. So traditional recruiting, I've already mentioned some of the positive aspects. It's quick, it's easy, it's black and white. We don't need to think about it too much. But some of the negative aspects, we may miss great candidates. We may miss that person who has 80% of what we need and 20% we could train them for, but we don't see them because we're using such a traditional approach. So what do we got here? It's 11:48. So in 7 minutes, I'm going to run you through the recruitment.
Actually, Janice, we started 10 minutes late.
Oh, okay. So we got 17 minutes. So we talked about the job description and the job posting, and we looked at our example, which just hurt my eyes to look at that one. Because it didn't accurately reflect what the job is. And something I always did as a recruiter was really tried in the posting to accurately reflect what is the job. So back to my customer service example, I tried not to go too negative, but I really tried not to sugarcoat it. You are going to spend a lot of time on the phone dealing with clients, or you're going to respond by email and phone. You don't have a lot of in-person contact. Obviously, you word that a little bit prettier for a job posting, but if it's someone who really wants a lot of people coming and going, that particular job that I would recruit for, that wasn't right for them. So I want right from the get-go to have a clear job posting because then I get better candidates applying for the job. And here's my example. If 80% of the job was customer service, so my example from HIA is perfect. My member services administrator, needed to be 80% customer service. The fact that that person had never used our CRM didn't really matter because nobody had. It was customized. If they at least knew what a database was and how to manipulate it, we'll do the rest. We'll train them. So when you're focusing on transferable skills in recruitment, and you want to know as the recruiter or the person who's looking to hire, what does the job require? Look at the job description and at each skill and ask yourself how the employee would perform if they didn't have that skill. So if they didn't have a degree in communications for the marketing job, how would they perform? And what are they getting from that? What did they get from that degree that's going to be beneficial to you? I sometimes, if I was really having trouble with it, would label the skills. I'd go through and label them. Is it essential? Nice to have? Icing on the cake. Another term is it a deal breaker? If I've got two people in front of me and this one doesn't have this, is that going to be my deal breaker? So it really helps you to get more clarity. Any questions on that or comments? Building the job posting can It's like I once heard about painting in your house. 80% of painting a room is preparing to paint. But what do we all do? Get the paint on the wall. Who cares if it's going everywhere? That's what the job posting is like. Preparing to recruit is a large part of it, but we don't want that part. We want to post the job and start looking at candidates rather than focusing on the preparation. So in terms of posting the job, if you're looking for that unicorn or you're looking for particular skills that you don't find from regular channels, what are some non-traditional places that you could post the job? So we've got some examples here. Does anybody have any other examples of non-traditional places that they've posted a job or ways that they've found candidates? I'd love to hear them because to me this is still such a bit of a mystery. Back in 2006, how do you think I found candidates? Post in the Saturday Calgary Herald. Cost a lot of money, $500 for a small one, $1,000 for a big one. But that was the only way that people found jobs.
LinkedIn status updates instead of relying on a job posting.
LinkedIn.
Passive job seekers.
Yeah, the passive job seekers. Yeah. Anything else?
So we use Facebook.
Facebook?
We use Facebook a lot, especially depending on the skill and the level.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah. Does anybody use Kijiji?
I've heard Craigslist has worked well in the States.
Yeah. It's interesting to me because I would never look for a job on Kijiji, but there are certain jobs that probably can be well recruited through Kijiji.
You know, here's an interesting thing. On the weekend, I was on Kijiji, and there was a job posting on Kijiji for legal counsel in an oil field service company in the city here in Calgary.
See, and that's not one that I would have thought.
Oh my goodness, no, a professional job posting on Kijiji. And I thought, wow, I wonder why. Like, are they having trouble connecting with people who specialize in that area? Are those people gone? It was just, or are they just trying a new approach? Because usually like a more established company will go those more traditional routes.
Exactly.
And I just thought, I should contact that company. And I'm going to actually. I'm going to contact them and figure out their strategy, like what the thought was.
You can report back, Carolyn.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Do you want to pass the mic? No, you're good. Yeah, very interesting. I know I get Indeed postings every morning based on, you put in a word. Well, it's fascinating because from the word coaching, you get tons of stuff that does not relate. But I feel like every job in the world is on Indeed because they scrape from other places. And it'll be interesting to see what happens next in the job posting world because if you remember, Workopolis and Monster used to be where it was at, and now that's completely changed.
We actually just did a posting at the airports as well.
That's a good idea too. Places that people are standing there with nothing else to do but read, right? Just like on the train stations where there's always marketing on the train stations.
We've used Shell's use more display advertising as well in environments like on your mobile device.
Yes.
Numbate or tap and things like that. So an ad it won't be specific to a posting, but it's more targeted to skill groups, geographies.
Yeah.
Interest,
Interesting.
or contextually targeted.
Yeah. Well, and you can we could, if we had an expert here, which is not me, in terms of buying advertising within Facebook and things like that. It's fascinating.
That can be very, very surgical
and
targeted.
Isn't it scary sometimes the ads you get on Facebook, you're like, why did I get that? What did I do? So screening applications, we talked a little bit about this one. Something that I used to do and that I would still do in the right situation was make a list of 6 to 8 key criteria and then put the candidates, say my top 10 or 12 or however many, because it's really quite simple, and then rate them. And the numbers you get, the most beautiful resume, you might get 3 of your 10 criteria, and then a resume you hadn't really looked at, maybe they're 10 out of 10. So it's like the SWOT analysis. It gives you an answer sometimes that you wouldn't necessarily come to, but it really makes you dive in and go, does this candidate actually meet my deal breakers? So here, back to our customer service person, what if they have a diploma? You'd really like them to have a degree, but what you really need is somebody that can answer the phone and talk to people and make the person on the other end of the phone happy. So you really need to know what's most important to you. Using the interview to find out about transferable skills. So does everyone know when I say behavioral descriptive interview questions? Where we ask people to tell us something they did in the past. The idea is that their past behavior will predict their future behavior. So this has been so common in the last quite a few years, where we ask questions about how did you do that in the past. So my example here, the job I've been talking about, the customer service person, you get all kinds of resumes when you advertise for a client relations or customer service. And we ended up interviewing a person who had not really worked in an office, but had worked in customer service in different organizations. And one of her jobs that she'd had for a long time was at the Hyatt spa. And so she gave me a couple of examples of dealing with difficult customers at the Hyatt spa. And one was so interesting. A woman had come in, and she had a big gift certificate, say $500. And her husband had given it to her for her birthday. And she said to my candidate, I won't use this. I do not want to be touched in a spa environment. I don't know why he gave me this. Poor husband's just thinking this is what you do. Well, instead of it being a problem, because the customer's already embarrassed, my candidate helped her pick out products and a bathrobe and all these nice things that she could buy with her gift certificate instead of a spa service. So the woman went home, and the husband called the spa and asked for the manager and said, my wife is so happy. I don't know what you guys did for her, but this is the best gift I ever gave her. Well, my candidate had used customer service skills and thinking skills and all creativity, all kinds of things. And I thought, you're our girl. And she was. She's still there, and she's a fantastic employee and great with customers who are not happy. And that's what I needed. So who would have ever thought that a receptionist from a spa is your best professional association customer service person? So that, I always trot her out because it was such a great example of a transferable skill. So I am going to ask you to take a minute, just because we can, and think about a transferable skill that you might include in an interview and how you would ask about it. And this might be something that you've already done in your job, or something that you're thinking about in the future. And I'll give you 1 minute to think about it, and then I'll ask you, and if you haven't held the mic yet, this is one of your last chances. Oh, yes.
So what I'm looking at in terms of transferable skills, and I'm qualifying that answer later on, is knowledge seeking. So if I see through the cover letter and through the resume progress in the career, or a desire to study more and more, for me that one is the most important transferable skills. Because if you are missing, and it's hard to find the perfect candidate, right? And with the ever-changing environment right now, as you said, I mean, the skills that you have right now, you're going to need different skills tomorrow. So for me, this ever believing in education and progress is very important, because you're going to acquire the skills anyway. However, looking through this presentation, that's why I want to qualify a little bit. I believe there is a bit of a disconnect in what you guys are looking, and me as a manager, what I'm looking. Right? First and foremost, I'm looking for values. What do you believe in? And those are very difficult to change in a lifetime. Usually by they finish the university, as you said, the values are set. What do you believe in? Let me give you an example. I am coming from a former communist country. For me, freedom of speech is paramount, because as a kid, as a teenager, I was forced to bow my head. All right? So for me, this is a value, right? The ability to speak up to my manager and say, you know what, I don't think you're correct. I have a different opinion, right? I will never apply to companies when I'm clicking to about, they say, our company was founded by this, and whoa, la la, and, praise the leader. Why? Because I'm adverse to that one. I used to praise the leader when I was a kid. I had to, right? So this is a value that, for you might not be important, but for me it's incredibly important, right? So I will not, no matter what transferable skills are. Let me give you another example. I worked for a company, was the perfect match for me. It was fun and nice, and we believed in in progress and family time and business acumen. And then we merged to another company. The values change overnight. So I was the same person, did the same job with the same skills, the same transferable skills, everything the same. I left within 6 months. Why? Because I did not identify with the company anymore. So honestly, I believe that, me as a manager, I would start with the values first and then trickle down. Because values and beliefs for me are very important. I can train. I trained one lady that studied with the reception, no knowledge in accounting. She left after 5 years with an MBA in her pocket. And she's doing fantastically. Why? Because she had the right values. I could train. Transferable skills, technical skills, you name it. I can do that one. Beliefs, unless you have a fundamental change in your life, it's hard to change.
Great point. Any other, any particular transferable skill you're thinking of that you would ask a behavioral descriptive question?
I just did a bunch of interviews for a position, and everyone, with only 3 people got it. And what I was looking for is, how do you manage through a decision you disagreed with, but you still supported it?
Good one.
And try and explain to people that it's okay to disagree. We're human. We all have different values, like you talked about. But being able to support that manager, whomever the leader is, even though you disagree with that. And people got scared of that question because they don't want to. It's okay to disagree with people, but how you still support. You can't go in the back room and say, "Oh, we have to do this, but I have to do it anyways." You have to be a leader amongst that. So it was a really tough question. Only about 3 or 4 people got it.
That's great. That's it. Yeah, and it was important to you, right? Absolutely. So you have to find somebody who's going to be able to do that. Yeah. I know that we all have great examples for this. We could talk about this all day. Final step, reference checks. I hate reference checks. I'm the HR person that's going to say it. I'm with Agatha. I never read cover letters, and I hate reference checks. But if you don't do them, there is a chance that you will miss information. And so I always do them, even though usually the 3 people you call will say the person is wonderful. But every now and then you get a nugget of information that helps you make a better decision. So that nugget is what I go for. And you can always ask about specific examples. So when I checked the reference for my candidate that had the Hyatt experience, I asked them about it, and they said yes. They probably didn't remember the specific example, but they said she was so creative in the ways that she made our customers happy. So that was what I was looking for, and they backed it up with the reference. So she wasn't just making it up. So this is the end for me. Thoughts for you from both Javier's presentation and mine. How will you transition and transform and not just feel disrupted? SWOT analysis, as we talked about, is a great exercise along with a lot of the tools that you've got in your package there. Skills gaps are really helpful. And assess competencies regularly. So if you've got job postings that you're just recycling and using the same one every time, you're probably not getting the best results because things are changing so quickly. And what you need and what candidates are bringing is always changing. So we want to make sure that we're keeping up with that. Nothing remains static. So that I'm going to hand over to Nicole.
Thank you very much, Janice. So the toolkit that you have in your folder, it's really about hoping to encourage us all, because we do it here at the Chamber, to think differently about the recruitment process. So the tools are a little bit different, like the SWOT analysis. Like doing a skills gap, asking an individual to do their own skills gap analysis. Because to face the world that Javier outlined means that we have to be continuous learners. And we have to be independent continuous learners because we cannot train for skills we don't know we're going to need. So if we don't do the SWOT analysis to try to figure out the strategic direction, if we don't do an individual SWOT analysis to figure out who among the team might be part of that journey, if we don't do the skills gap analysis, both institutionally but individually, we're not going to have the teams that we're going to need. And so those of you particularly who have young children, they're going to grow up with this. But we have a population that needs to transition. And so what can we collectively do as an organization, a big organization, a country, a province, a city, to help each other to move through this transition? Because I don't know about you, but I don't want to be a statistics. And you're lucky in a way that it's Janice that walked you through this, because I'm dead set against the way we do resumes. I'm dead set against continuing to do cover letters that nobody reads. I absolutely abhor applicant tracking systems because I implemented them so I know the lens that is used to precisely screen out the unicorns, because unicorns are hard work. They're not easy to manage. Unicorns are going to do what you were talking about. They're going to talk back. They're going to do what Michael does. Challenge. Say the uncomfortable stuff. We don't like that. But guess what? If we don't teach the young ones, actually we don't need to teach them, because they're growing up challenging us continually because they've got access to the wide web. They don't need us. They don't need our role modeling anymore. They get their own. So if nothing comes out of today except, oh my God, the train has left the station and I missed it, please, some of these conventional tools that you have, let's think about using them unconventionally. And I know that recruiters hate when I say that. I hate chronology in a resume. I can read. I can go on LinkedIn and check out if your chronology jives. That doesn't tell me if you're going to be that superstar in customer service. So if you want me to hire you, talk to me about your critical thinking. Because that's what you hired, actually, with that young woman. I don't care if she was there for 5 years. Somebody else will figure this one out. But I want to know, what are you going to do for me so that I am not a casualty of the universe that we're embarking on? So hopefully some of the tools that look very innocuous and very conventional, you'll be inspired to use them differently and to think differently about how you're going to help your teams, your colleagues, your friends, your family. That's what we try to do here. We couldn't have done it without Janice and Javier, so my heartfelt thanks. I'm hoping that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like I said earlier, the talent pool is committed to continue to disrupt, because if we don't begin to think differently, somebody else will for us. Take 2 minutes, please fill out the survey form, leave it on the table. Your feedback is critical. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see you again in the very near future. And Janice, Javier, you're the best partner in crime I could ever dream. Thanks, everybody.